I didn't sleep much as a kid. Some nights I was watching TV, others I was kept awake by creaks and moans. Usually I'd be to bed by 11, sometimes 12. For my young age, the latest I'd ever reached was 1. I don't remember most of it, just a near black room and blue light from the television. So, I was up one night. I was 7, sick with strep throat. I always seemed to catch it. About an hour or two before, I'd vomited everything up and found myself ill in bed. The TV volume was low, the mumblings of late-night kid shows chattering like ghosts. Mom left the puke pan on the floor beneath my bed, just in case. When I was done throwing up, I'd stare into my reflection. Pale, glassy, and shaded in blue. I wasn't disappointed to miss school. Overjoyed, if anything. Every day I went in and was almost silent. I'd talk here and there. I'd do my work as lazy as possible. I'd come home and draw while Clone Wars was playing, and then I'd try to forget everything I'd been taught. On conference night, my teacher pointed out a few failed assignments for math. I told my parents I was hypothesizing, like we learned in science. The burn of my vomit still hung in my throat. Eyes were dry, arms and legs heavy. The blankets no longer warm enough. Something in the basement was working. A machine, maybe the furnace. It conjured up images of giant metal teeth. My sick form on a conveyor belt, rolling into them as they smashed together. Red eyes like fire alarms flashed inside the head of the thing, and it gnashed its fangs again. The black tore me out of my vision. The show had ended. The next one waiting to come on. First commercials. The room lit up again. I watched the ceiling fan do nothing for a while and considered what I'd do tomorrow. I had a few ideas for comics, a couple thoughts on characters. I wondered what it was like to write. No pictures, just the words. I blinked and the fan hadn't moved an inch. I shivered. The commercials were still going. I picked up the remote, squinting at the TV. Too many churning ideas, twisting around my head like stars, and I only had so much money to waste in the toy store. I figured I'd flip channels, maybe bore myself into sleep. Up came the menu. I checked to the right to see if any channels will be showing something good in the near future. Nothing. King of the Hill was going. Dad said not to watch that. Infomercials, talk shows, and reruns on different channels. The kid shows were all running out. I went as far left as I could to check if anything good was playing in the moment. Nothing. I shut my eyes, relaxed, and let the remote land at my side. It was either be up all night or try and sleep, only to be up all night. I shut my eyes tighter, fingers curling at my sides. In my head, I reimagined Star Wars characters toting guns and firing lasers, calling for one another over the flames and the smoke. A clone trooper I named Jigsaw stood against the Sith Lord in an all-black armor, face covered. They threw their hands aside and drew a red lightsaber. I was still busy thinking of a name for him. I picked up the remote again, opened my eyes. I held down the button and watched the channels fly upward, disappearing into the infinite abyss. I squinted and let my tongue loll, the stations all scrolling faster. I was deep in the TV's ocean. Shows tilted with numbers and dashes, as if they might be alien broadcasts. I imagined Jigsaw again, him surrounded by other clones, reading a scanner, picking up an enemy transmission. Words. I'd accidentally gone a few channels down, so I scrolled back up. Sitting in between the empty stations was a show. Chubby's show, it said. Not one I've ever heard of. Head cocked, I stared at the blue rectangle on the menu. Something about it fixated me. Recurrent thoughts circled my mind again. The playground, the classroom, school bells ringing, the cafeteria. The blankets couldn't keep me warm anymore. The memories shone like gems beneath sand. The ocean was dark, but they sparkled anyway. I glanced up, once, higher into the abyss. There were sharks circling over my head. I'd seen this show before somewhere, but I had no memory of what it was about, or why it made me remember other things. I blinked once or twice, then I read the show's description. Meet Chubby, Fatso, Bam Bam and Boomer, the greatest teacher for the greatest generation. I blinked again, rereading the words. My mind ran circles around itself, whispers of a time not too distant spinning around my head. The playground was in the fog, the kids were laughing in the classroom, then the school bells rang. You froze in the cafeteria, it towered over even the principal, tall, black, and... That was when it stopped. My heart pounded my sternum, gut seizing up with twisting pain. My bladder needed to loose itself. I clicked select to watch the show. The TV went dark. I gasped, jolting forward. I put my hands behind me and craned my neck out. The power had gone out, I figured, or something weird had happened with the wires. Like spiders, the thoughts crawled up my back, bit my flesh, and left it burning. The back of my neck was hot and prickly, throat dry with puke. The air still smelled sickly sweet like illness. The humidifier hummed in the corner. It was a virus. Dad had told me about them, how I should be careful about what I clicked on the internet so that I don't infect the computer with one. I pressed the remote to try turn the TV on, and it didn't work. I was seconds away from shouting for Mom or Dad when I pressed on the button 3 more times and it turned on by itself. The circus music started. The bedroom was glowing blue again. Drum beats and whistles chimed, a title appearing in big yellow and red letters. Chubby's Show, it read. I felt nailed to the bed. It began to introduce the cast. Fatso, the screen displayed. A ragged cat, orange fur missing in places and dirty marks all over the costume. He swung around a giant hammer, grin stretched onto his costume face. There were kids running from him in every direction. Fatso, the TV narrated. I crawled backwards. All the kids were screaming. One of them off screen was crying. My head banged against the wall. Bam Bam, cheered the TV. A pig appeared on screen. Mud spots covered his face, tears in his costume's fabric. He was in a parking lot chasing down a group of kids. They checked over their shoulder and sprinted. One of them screamed, barely audible. Jason! They looked ahead of them, as if checking off screen. Jason! It was Boomer's time to shine. The elephant held the trigger on a power drill, raising it over his head inside a wooden room. A kid strapped to the table pounded their fists on the sides and screamed at the ceiling, thrashing. Jason! Jason! No, not Jason. Grayson. Me. Chubby made his appearance. He brandished another giant hammer, posing with pride. I trembled and my voice shook and I screamed into the night. Mom? Dad? The TV was louder now. Chubby, it exclaimed. I shook beneath the blankets. Mom? Chubby was on their heels after the mob of kids. They were all running towards the screen like they might escape the dog. Dad? They reached the screen, pounding from the other side. The old box TV shook in its place and rattled with thuds. Grayson! Grayson! All the kids were screaming. Turn off the TV! Turn off the TV! It was like waking up again. I sat forward and leaned in to listen. Grayson, turn off the TV! Grayson, can you hear us? You have to turn the TV off! I blinked a few times. Chubby was closing the gap, nearly to the kids. Grayson! Grayson! My lip quivered. Chubby was only a few feet away. I pointed the remote and clicked. The TV paused. Seconds from death, the kids were frozen, with their eyes wide open, hands stuck to the screen, fists pounding against the glass. Chubby stood no more than 2 feet behind, hammer raised, inches from swinging. If he'd brought it down over their heads, it would have smashed like a pumpkin, spilling guts and spraying bits of skull. My breath was still catching up. My heart raced inside my chest. The remote was sweaty and warm between my fingertips. The bedroom was the coldest it had been since the night started. "Mom!" I hollered. "Dad?" I threw the blanket off me and sprung my feet over the edge. They carried me across the carpet, still wet and puke-scented, and left me at the edge of the door. I banged on it stupidly, tearing it open and switching on the lights. "Mom?" I tried. "Dad?" There they were, motionless. The blanket was no longer on them. Their eyes were wide open, glued to the ceiling, arms splayed out to their sides, legs straight, laying on opposite sides of the bed. They looked almost dead. "Mom? Dad?" I dashed towards them. I grabbed Mom by the side and tried to shake her awake, screaming into her ear. "Mom! Mom! 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 Mom!" Her body was limp to every touch. She wasn't cold like she was dead. She hardly breathed, yet her chest caved in every now and then. I jumped over her and dove for my dad. "Dad?" He wasn't any better. I pulled his hair. He hated when I did that. I yanked his ears and slapped him on the cheek and shook him by the shoulders while I knelt on his chest, and all I felt was his stomach driving down. And all I felt was his stomach diving down, diving up, diving down, diving up. They were sleeping. I froze on my knees, staring into the cold eyes of a man half alive, breathing, heart beating, pulse flowing, but no thoughts. The tears bit at my eyes like hissing cats. I shooed them away and fell into my dad's chest. "Dad?" I whimpered. And the noise came back. Vague, yet I heard it. I was still lost in Dad's chest, but my eyes were open, like the devil's whispers. "Grayson, Grayson." The voices were echoing from the bedroom again. "Grayson." I lifted my head up, rubbing my eyes with a forearm. This wasn't over yet. I jumped off the bed and ran. I tore into the bedroom and stopped in front of the TV. The children were back on the screen. They were pounding the glass. The big metal box was rattling on its stand, shaking so hard it almost fell off. "Grayson!" Their eyes were lit up like street lamps. They pounded their hands harder against the window. "Grayson, can you hear us? Are you there?" I trembled. "Hello?" I shouted. "Grayson, lock all your doors." My chest ached. "Lock all your doors, Grayson, there." The TV went dark again. White lines of static bloomed, zipping up and down, humming. My hand was stuck over my heart, feeling its beat. It seemed to speak in Morse code. "You heard them, Grayson. Go lock your doors. Go lock your doors, Grayson. There. The TV turned back on. Boomer was sitting in a chair. The room was red, made of the same materials you might find on a playground. The sofa appeared like a giant lion. Boomer's couch was just big and yellow, like a slide. He was reading a book the size of a newspaper, a bright red hardcover. "What the kids need to learn," the front cover read. Boomer was silent. So was the room. The TV produced nothing but a low drone, the occasional hum or toot of Boomer mumbling to himself. The camera recording had a mishap. The screen was out of focus for a moment. Then there were footsteps. Fatso the cat rushed in. It jumped up and down and danced around Boomer's chair in glee. "Boomer, Boomer, Boomer, guess what?" "What, Fatso? What is it? I'm trying to read." Fatso started stomping his feet, as if he was doing the potty dance. He tapped his toes quicker and quicker like a football player, turning towards me. "Boomer, Boomer, look!" Fatso pointed off the screen, staring directly at me. Boomer's gaze turned my way. My heart fell dead inside me. "We got one," said Fatso. Boomer and Fatso started chuckling all giddy. I screamed and covered myself with a blanket. I started shaking my legs and my head, and my mouth got dry as my eyes spilt tears. I peeked over the edge of the blanket, thinking they were crawling out of the television, but they hadn't. Fatso and Boomer were running. They were racing through the house, around all the childish things like slides and monkey bars. They dashed up a set of spiral stairs and stopped at the end of a long hallway, pounding on the door. Doot 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 doot. Bam Bam answered the door. The pig oinked into the faces of Fatso and Boomer. Bam Bam, Bam Bam, cried Boomer. They turned and pointed at me again. I froze, with my eyes hanging above the blanket. We got one, they said in unison. With a break in all the noise, the three animals froze in the hallway. I thought the show had stopped, but the TV still hummed, just barely, even though the animals were unblinking. They stared a while longer, grinning. Then a door creaked open. Chubby the dog stepped out, blood smeared on his costume, dirt and grime clouding up his white and black fur. He stared with huge, costumed eyes, cold and black. The show seemed to stop again. Then it came back on. The four of the animals were running. They were out of the house now, jetting off into a parking lot. Waiting at the edge for them, parked at an angle, was a shiny red car, round and stubby, small enough you could fit another in the same stall. It was like blinking back to life. My heart was screaming now, echoes in my bloodstream rushing to my brain. Everything was suddenly cold and achy, and I thought my head might explode. I remembered what the kids were saying. Grayson, they cried. Grayson, go lock your doors, there. Coming. In a tide of chills, I rushed out of the room. I always kept my window locked. I ran into my parents' bedroom. The windows were clear. I raced back out into my playroom, almost stepping on the toys. I locked that window. I checked every window in the kitchen twice and cleared the sliding back door. I got to the front door and barreled into the basement, locking the glass door downstairs. I paused, breathing. The swings in the backyard were moving in the wind. The knife. I remembered my dad's kitchen cleaver. He always buried it deepest in the drawer so nobody would get hurt with it. Well, someone was going to have to get hurt now. I turned, staring into the blackened basement. I swallowed and chewed on my lip. Then I gasped it for the stairs. I went up them, rounded a corner and rushed into the kitchen. The drawer was across from me, around the island. I zipped past it, tore it open and started rummaging. Long blades, short blades, all of them big enough to kill. None as deadly as the thing that shined beneath. It was huge, silvery and perfect for chopping a hand off. Take off someone's head if you knew how to use it right. I was mesmerized. Something occurred to me. People were going to get hurt tonight. Bad things were going to happen to someone. I suddenly felt very dangerous, picking up the cleaver and twisting it in my hand. It was almost elegant. I raced back towards my bedroom. The house was dark and still. Every footstep and breath echoed. Other than panels of moonlight on the walls, I couldn't see a thing. I rushed inside my bedroom, panting, and slammed the door behind me. With a quick hand, I turned and locked the knob, glancing around in every direction for the TV remote. It was laying on the floor, inches from the puke pan. I grabbed for it and aimed it at the TV. I yanked the shade shut and turned the volume down. The camera's quality had dropped. Everything was glitchy and distorted. In darker frames, a car moved under street lamps, skipping its blinker and flying through all the stops. There were green, rectangular signs indicating the streets. I couldn't read their names. Chubby and friends were swinging their arms in glee, Fatso at the wheel. They started singing and clapping. Streetlights started passing quicker and they nearly hit a mailbox. While their tires screeched and their engines squealed, I took a moment to head for the window, pulling the curtain aside and checking out of it. Down left, nobody. downright not a soul. The street was empty, all but the lights. I could tell where the car was. There were 2 lanes, a right turn on each side. The glow of the streetlights was distant now, but present. They were on Newman Road. No more than a left turn and 100 meters from my house. I made sure the shades were closed all the way. I ran everything through my head again. Every lock was shut. The cleaver was in my hand, the remote on the bed. Triple checking now, I reviewed the house once more. Bedroom shades, windows, and doors were all locked. I have the cleaver and the remote. They'll be here soon. Seconds later, I watched the car on the screen turn and slow to a halt. Outside, tires squealed. The animals danced and sang no longer. I could hear them outside. I picked the remote up, muting the TV entirely. My breath whisked in and out one more time. The camera hovered above the car a while longer. The animals were going around back to the trunk, hoisting it open. From the angle, I couldn't see what they were doing. Then, they began to pull things out. For Fatso, the giant hammer would do. He held it over his shoulders and stood like a soldier. Bam Bam picked a Tommy gun out, loading up a magazine. He racked the gun and checked the sights. Boomer ripped a knife from the trunk, holding the blade up to the moon. He let it dance through the air, light bouncing off its edges. For Chubby, the axe. He held it tight and stood deathly still. When everyone was ready, Bam Bam slammed the trunk. I heard it from outside, staring into the curtains. Then the footsteps began, just little scrapes on the concrete. They started for the front door. The camera didn't follow them at first. They went off-screen and disappeared. Then it moved to the front door, from the perspective of the peephole. I froze now, sat on the edge of the bed and paled. I turned and looked at the floor, at the spot where the vomit had been cleaned off. All I found was the puke pan. And, staring into it, ghostly white and totally silent, was a boy my age who thought he'd known everything. No, he didn't. I swallowed at my reflection. The front doorbell rang. My head shot up. In the TV screen, a grainy image produced itself. 4 costumed beasts standing on my front porch. They held their weapons at the sides, as if the job were no more casual than a package delivery. Boomer stepped back a foot or 2, having rang the bell, waiting. They didn't blink, any of them, nor did they breathe. I tried to imagine what was inside them, beneath their costumes. Flesh? Couldn't be, I thought. The demons stood, waiting on the porch. They held their menacing glares at the door and managed to maintain stillness. Without a breath, or seemingly even a thought, they carried on waiting. A minute had passed, and then another. That was when they walked. Without a word, Chubby was the first to turn his shoulder, and then Bam Bam, then Fatso, then Boomer. The 4 of them all faced the lawn, descended the steps of the porch, and started off down the lawn. Their car was off in the distance a ways, waiting for them in silence. They went around the corner, in front of my garage door. I figured they'd stepped ahead enough to where I could see them again. My grip on the cleaver loosened, sweat cooling on its handle. My breaths came more shallow. Chubby and friends seemed to be leaving. I sighed. My shoulders sloped down. I shut my eyes and leaned my head back, feeling the whole room spin around me. Where thoughts of Star Wars characters and homemade comics once roamed, now 1,000 nightmares seemed to plague me. I rested my head against the wall and checked the TV. Chubby and friends were gone. Then I squinted. Their car was still there, empty. Nobody was walking out towards it. My eyes shot wide open. My head flipped on itself. No, they weren't leaving. Of course they weren't going to. They were probably marching around in circles outside, looking for an entrance. Grayson, 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 lock all of your doors, lock all of your windows. The kids were screaming to me still, but every window was locked and every door. Unless Chubby and friends thought about busting in, they had no entry. Crash! I jumped and screamed. Something had shattered. I powered off the TV. The room fell back into darkness. I sat on the edge of the bed and waited, breathing. Softly, from somewhere beneath the house, there were quiet footsteps echoing off the concrete floor. Little clicks, ones that danced through the air. From the basement. They'd shattered the downstairs glass. I heard the door to the stairs open. They stepped up them, maintaining silence. All I heard was my own breath and the crunch of carpet. Not a voice dared to speak. Nothing was breathing but me. I saw them again, their breathless, motionless chests, standing unblinking on the porch. They stared with black eyes and held their weapons patiently. They were nearly up the stairs now. Their feet scraped the floor and weapons dragged slowly. I heard the sound of the axe grinding against tile. That was when I jumped in the closet. I shut both doors, left a crack, and pushed myself as far back as I could go, covering myself with the stacked bins of Legos in front of me. The footsteps were approaching now. From down the hallway, the axe cut through the carpet. A shuddery breath escaped like a butterfly. I caught it in the air and crushed it in my hand. "Grayson, don't make a sound," those kids seemed to whisper. There was something comforting about the closet, like thousands of children's hands patting me on the back, embracing me and whispering into my ear. "It's going to be all right," they said. Well, I wasn't an idiot at age 7. I knew that's what they said to one another. Now, they were no better than ghosts. I leaned farther back into the darkness, gripping the cleaver harder. The house was still so damn quiet. The axe dragged along the floor. They were nearly to the bedroom now. Their footsteps rumbled the house, the walls seeming to fall over in my head. I wondered if the roof could sustain itself with the weight of the demons. The floor shook again. Feet away, still feet, inches. They stopped. There wasn't a sound anymore, just the noise of the machine in the basement, the one with the giant metal teeth and the alarm red eyes, a conveyor belt carrying me into its maws. Sweat broke on my forehead. I clenched my jaws together and tried to keep them shut. Opening them meant screaming. In the closet, my breath began to quicken. It huffed in and out like steam loosed from a kettle. I bit down on my teeth harder and grunted. "Grayson, Grayson, don't make a sound. Just breathe, just breathe. You have a knife, you have a knife, you have a knife." I whimpered again, shaking in my skin. A minute had passed, nearly 2, and no noise from outside the door, just the ghosts in my head and the teeth in the basement. "Grayson, don't you make a sound, don't you?" Thud, like someone stamping their foot hard. Thud, against the ground. The noise seemed to be coming in quicker succession, faster, as if a bull was slamming on its hooves. Or an elephant. Then it stopped. The room fell silent. The only thing in the house breathing was me. Every breath made my head get hot and cold, like my mind couldn't decide between staying awake or passing out. Then, the TV turned on. The footage was grainy, the hooves stamping closer. In shades of grey, a costumed elephant charged down the hallway on the screen and... "Grayson!" The door shattered off its hinges. I was still in the back of the closet, screaming. The TV flipped channels in a screen of static. "Grayson! Grayson! Grayson!" The kids again. "Grayson, you have to kill them." My heart thudded. Boomer looked straight toward me with wild eyes. "Kill them!" I narrowed my eyes. Boomer held the knife over his head. I sprang up and swung the cleaver. It caught him in the gut and Boomer doubled over. The kids on the TV were all slapping and pounding the screen. The box rattled again. There were shapes rushing in through the doorway. Fatso, Bam Bam, Chubby. Fatso came first. He swung the hammer and missed. I caught his arm with the cleaver and dug low, hacking at a leg. Fatso's head reared back and he screamed. I ribbed him with a cleaver and he fell and stood in the doorway. Bam Bam and Chubby squeezed in at the same time. I swung for Bam Bam and he dodged it. Chubby grabbed me by the arm and tightened his grip on my wrist. I screamed again. "Mom! Dad!" The cleaver fell from my hand. There were tears welling in my eyes. Chubby yanked me towards him. He gripped me by the wrist. His fingers were harder than metal, but he wasn't a robot. Some sick pulse flowed throughout his skin. He craned his face down to meet mine. Eyes inches from one another, Chubby held me close and tried to brush the tears from my cheeks. He soothed me in a voice falsely calm. "Oh, Grayson, relax. You're going to learn so much." He leaned back a bit, Bam Bam standing over his shoulder. He raised the Tommy gun. "You're one of the luckiest kids alive." Everything spiraled through my mind again. The playground, my parents, the comics in my room. Jigsaw was my favourite clone I'd ever made. He would play dead, then come back alive to win a fight. "Grayson! Grayson!" The kids were still screaming. My heart beat in my chest. "Run! Run away!" Run away, I thought. I narrowed my eyes, slammed my foot down. It caught Chubby's toes and he flinched back. I shook his grip off. On the floor was the cleaver. The gun went off. I zipped out of his way and hacked at his neck with the cleaver. It caught him in the throat and he bled black. Bam Bam gurgled, flopping to the ground. Chubby was across the room from me now, bent forward like a wrestler, waiting to strike. He started to circle around towards me. I went the opposite way, like we stood in a ring. Chubby inched forward a bit, taunting me. "There's no use, Grayson," he said. "You know we never really die, right?" He laughed again. "We'll always be around to find you again." The kids on the screen had fallen silent, but the TV still rattled every few seconds. I could hear their voices echoing. "Run!" I did. I ducked backwards out of the room. Chubby's feet pounded the floor behind me. I undid the lock on the front door and tried to rush out of it. "Wait for me," Chubby hollered. "Don't go so soon." Chubby nearly grabbed me. He moaned, swinging the axe. It buried itself on the wall, and I was on the porch. With quick feet, I ran across the lawn. The neighbor's house wasn't far. I was past our fence and on the grass, padding up their driveway. The concrete was cold beneath bare feet, scratchy and painful. "Mr. Harkins," I cried out. "Mr. Harkins!" The front door swung open. I turned around. Chubby was in the lawn, dragging his axe through the grass. He froze with me, staring with eyes that hadn't changed all night. Still, they read differently. Fear. Mr. Harkins stepped out on his front porch. He had a gun in hand, the other holding a phone up to his ear. The old man pointed the gun at me and gasped. "Grayson?" "He's right there, Mr. Harkins. He's right there. He's on my lawn." Mr. Harkins started shooting. Rounds cracked in the night. He wasn't a good shot for his age. Chubby charged across the lawn like a soldier and threw the axe behind him, landing it in the grass. Mr. Harkins stepped down his porch and peppered Chubby's car with bullets. The gun went empty. Harkins cursed and let the pistol fall to his side. He took the phone from his ear and screamed across the street at Chubby. He was hopping into the car, spinning the keys in the ignition and slamming hard on the gas. "I hope you rot in hell," Harkins hollered. "I'll see you there, and I won't miss this time." Chubby hit the end of the street, hardly waiting at the stop sign. Seconds later, he was gassing it to the right, disappearing behind the row of houses. His engine roared, but the night was otherwise silent. Moments later, it was all quiet, except for the sound of Harkins and I breathing. He turned around, standing in the drive a few feet ahead, phone and pistol lowered at his sides. He must have heard everything, I figured. Harkins was always up late in the night, polishing weapons or watching movies. He never admitted it, but it was better than lamenting over his wife. The man's stone-hard eyes seemed to crack a little. He frowned beneath a handlebar mustache. My throat fell apart. I whimpered, and something bit in my eyes. The police had already been on their way. Harkins had called them long before. He'd figured it was just some bad fight my family had gotten into, and he was just a lonely old man caught in the crossfire. It's a damn good thing I lived next door to a paranoid, to a night owl. Might have been dead otherwise. I'm 22 now. I don't think a lot about the incident, but I know it's why I can't sleep at night. It's the reason I don't leave the TV on anymore. No, I don't think about it. There's nothing for the police to find when I got there. My parents were wide awake, although they couldn't remember a lot. They knew all the important details. They told the cops I'd been home all along. As for the bodies, they weren't there anymore. No blood, no weapons, no sign of entry beside the shattered basement door, and the axe in the lawn. There was no proof the gang had ever showed up. No proof other than my word and Mr. Harkins. When I tried to show one of the officers the channel I'd clicked on, it was gone, replaced with a box that said "Unused Station" in all caps. He chewed the back of his pen, pale. Then he glanced my way and nodded his head. For days, the police checked up on the house again and again to see if they could find any evidence. There were no fingerprints, no tufts of fur, nothing better than the tears in the carpet and the cracks in the tile. The axe, under further inspection, had no fingerprints either. They found the bullet holes in the ground from the gunfire, but they didn't find any bullets. Chubby and friends had never existed. The cops had closed the case and labelled it an accident. Nobody in town believed them. Nobody but my parents. Definitely not Mr. Harkins. I used to go over to his place a lot, after the whole thing had ended. Usually he made me a cup of coffee the older I got. We'd sit in his dusty old living room and talk for a while. I tried to ignore the towels draped over picture frames here and there. There were only 2, but I noticed them. It's like trying to leave a body in your house and expect it won't stink. Everything smells worse when it's your dead wife. Mr. Harkins would do a lot of the talking, give me wisdom, encourage me not to waste my life, try to teach me what a man was like. He said he liked my dad. He just thought he wasn't good at that. He said he thought I was scared. Like most kids are, but more than usual. Harkins would lean back in his chair, sip his mug, and stare at me all the while. Then he'd lean forward again, steam blowing out of the cup. There are sick people in this world. Your, father wouldn't like me using these words. He sniffled. There are some real sick assholes out there, kid, he restated. Harkins stared into his coffee mug, watching the steam boil out of it. Then he took a slower sip, leaning his head back and wiping his lip. He stared back at me, eyes getting thin, growing grey, and he pursed his lips together, watching the floor. He seemed as if he'd fallen down, woken up somewhere in the past. They'll use you, he told me. The kids are the easiest to take. He frowned and swallowed. They can scream, but they can't throw a punch. Harkins lifted his gaze again, eyes towards me. Then he threw his head back and took another sip of coffee, gulping it down. When you study anthropology, most of the time, your loftiest goal is finding an unknown, long-dead civilization. Getting to make first contact with a living, breathing, and brand new culture was like finding the Holy Grail in a field full of four-leaf clovers. So, needless to say, that when my team and I got the opportunity, we were over the moon. Our boat cut through the waters off the coast of Brazil towards the modestly sized island. My crew was small but experienced. Amy, Greg, myself, and our translator, Miguel. Why bring a translator to a totally uncontacted tribe? Well, it didn't hurt hoping that the tribe spoke Portuguese somehow. We all knew it was a snowball's chance in hell. but you never know. Our boat slowed as we neared the beach. We landed softly, and our spirits were higher than ever. God, what a rush. The game plan was to lead with Miguel, obviously. The other three of us didn't exactly look local, even on the mainland, so we were hoping that Miguel, having at least close to the same skin tone, would help. There were about 50 feet of beach in front of us, followed by a dense tree line. You couldn't see more than 5 feet into the brush, so naturally, the three of us imagined a tribe 6 feet in. We were excited, but we knew what we were doing was dangerous. Uncontacted tribes tend to be violent to outsiders. We didn't want to look like we were bringing an army. That's why there was only 4 of us. Saying we'd be outnumbered was an understatement. Even more, we had no idea the state of the island people on any level. Was it one giant tribe? Maybe small ones? We could have been walking into a war zone for all we knew. Walking into the tree line wasn't much better than suicide. So we waited. It was a beautiful day. The beach was calming. I could wait until someone stumbled upon us. It was only about an hour before we heard a yell from beyond the trees. We all instantly jumped. Miguel took point. We all had to be trained to shoot before our outing, and we were all given a pistol and a knife for self-protection. My hand instantly went to my gun, but it stayed holstered. Slowly, from the tree line, a small troop of native men approached. Each of them held a drawn bow, pointed towards us. They were dark-skinned, shirtless, and each was covered with dark red tattoos, head to toe. The tattoos were different on each person, but they were just as intricate as they were unique. They were all rather skinny. A few had potbellies, but otherwise they seemed strong and healthy. They all had short hair, minus the one leading the brigade, who had long, braided hair down to the middle of his back. They inched towards us at a snail's pace. Each of them stepped in unison. They had definitely trained for situations like this. The long-haired one yelled something. I had no idea what it was. Miguel said something back. Couldn't tell what it was either. What's going on? Amy Whisper yelled through her teeth at Miguel. I'm asking if they speak Portuguese. Miguel turned and faced Amy to say it. Smart. We didn't want them thinking we were doing anything sneaky. He turned back to them and tried to communicate again. There were a few sentences back and forth, with the Portuguese word for Portuguese being brought up by Miguel each time. Their bows were still drawn. Each of us had at least 2 arrows aimed on us. The long-haired leader seemed to be agitated with Miguel, but suddenly, one of the men on his right spoke up. I picked out one of the words that didn't mean anything to me, but he said it many times. A jogador, he said at least once in each sentence. The leader took a moment before lowering his bow and turning to his small battalion. They all kept their bows up. A jogador, he asked them as a group. One agreed immediately and repeated it back to him, then another and another. Slowly but surely, they all lowered their bows. I like this jogador thing, Greg joked to the rest of us. 4 of the soldiers slowly circled us and ended up behind us, leaving their leader in front of us. He nodded and said another sentence in whatever language he spoke. He beckoned us with his hand and turned around. He wanted us to follow him. The optimist screamed in my head that we were in, and I only really cared to listen to the optimist at this point. We entered the tree line and followed the long-haired man, and we were followed by his soldiers. It was only a minute or two before Amy asked what a jogador meant to Miguel. I don't know, he admitted. It could mean throw them a feast for all I know. Greg and I looked at each other, smiled and nodded our heads. Or it could mean let's skin them alive in town square. It's a toss-up, he finished. Greg and I stopped nodding at each other. It was a short walk to their village. Not more than 10 minutes. It consisted of about 20 huts, all in a rough circle, some closer and some further from the centre. A giant fire pit was the centrepiece. There were a few more people out and about, mostly women and children. The women shared the red tattoos, but had much fewer of them. But their faces were pierced all over. Their eyebrows, lips, noses, ears. It seemed like each woman shared this. The children didn't seem to have their tattoos or piercings yet, and were busy chasing each other between the huts. That is, until they saw us. Every person in town turned to stare at us. A few of the women said something. One of the few men grabbed a child and clung onto her. The soldiers around us didn't seem to care. They continued on to one of their far huts. 2 of the soldiers took guard outside the hut, while the leader stepped inside. Miguel followed him, and I followed Miguel. Inside was a man, sitting on a large woven bed. He looked much like the soldiers. Short hair, tattoos. The 2 locals talked for a moment. The topic was clearly the aliens that had landed on their shore. It was a short chat before the leader left us in the hut with a new man. He spoke to Miguel. His language sounded more familiar. A smile crossed Miguel's face as he responded. He turned to us. He speaks Portuguese. Greg, Amy, and I looked at each other like we had just struck gold. It was another minute before we got more information. Miguel filled us in. He has been to the mainland. His name is a Jucador. I have told him we are here for academic purposes and to extend an olive branch. He says he will translate for us, he announced excitedly. I almost fainted. This couldn't have been going better in my wildest dreams. Oh my God, I yelled as I hugged Amy and then Greg. Having to go from the native language to Portuguese to English was a pain we were all willing to easily look over. We exited the tent, and a Jucador took a stance near the centre of the town. He announced something loudly. He had the attention of the whole tribe, even more poking their heads out of their own huts. Once he was done, the townspeople seemed to relax a bit, and the long-haired man came over to greet us again. A Jucador told us we were welcomed by the town, and the long-haired man, the chieftain, even offered to call their sister tribe for a celebration in a few days. We graciously accepted, of course. We were treated like family for the next 2 days. We learned how they prepared their food and spices. We learned a local sport where they used a ball of tree bark and had to carry it between 2 goals. But they had to balance it on the end of a stick the whole time. They couldn't touch it with their bodies. They were ridiculously skilled at it, even though it sounded impossible. Full contact as well. I was sore the next morning. We learned that the children getting their tattoos and piercings was a rite of passage into adulthood. This was absolutely incredible. I had a big interest in their sister tribe. Shortly after we initially arrived, we heard what sounded like a horn in the distance. A Jucador explained it was the other tribe. It was such an interesting sound. I never heard a horn quite like it. I grilled the Jucador about the sister tribe, to the point I think he was getting tired of me. Still though, he answered all my questions. Apparently, the other tribe wasn't a fifth of the size of their own, but they still controlled about 80% of the island. He explained that hundreds of years ago, the 2 tribes warred, and a Jucador's tribe was defeated. They still respected the borders that their forefathers had agreed on, even though the tribes had been on good terms longer than any of them had been alive. The emissary from the sister tribe coming to the celebration that had been planned was a great honor for their tribe. I was disappointed with that. Apparently, only one of them was coming. Ajukudo assured me, though, it was a good thing. Any more than one of them showing up would mean a party that would never end. It came to our third day on the island, and the first thing I heard was Greg asking about the celebration. The chieftain explained to him, through our two translators, that it would be that night, and would be in the honor of the white men. Hey, that's what I like to hear. I smiled as I jabbed Greg in the shoulder. Greg was in similar spirits as the chieftain continued. He said something along the lines of, "Oh yes, the entire village has learned to love the white men." We told Amy later after she woke, and she was a little jealous. We told her it was going through two translators. They definitely meant all of us. It just got lost in translation. I had a binder full of notes already, and I spent the rest of the day adding to it. But I decided to leave it back in the hut during the party. I could fill in some stuff about the sister tribesmen and the celebration from memory. And it wasn't long before darkness had fallen and the party was on. Even more culture to write about. The fire in the center of the town was twice as tall as either of the other nights. They danced and played music, and we drank a sweet alcohol they made from fermented fruits. It was a few hours of good times and dancing. I had forgotten the man from the sister tribe was even supposed to attend. Suddenly, though, out of the darkness of the brushes, the horn sounded again. This time, much closer than I'd heard it the other day. The locals cheered in unison as they scrambled to their seats around the fire. The chieftain gathered us outsiders up and pushed us to our seats, a big, goofy, drunken smile on his face the whole time. Everyone, but Miguel, that is. He had taken him out in front of the fire and excitedly announced something. What was it? I couldn't guess. I looked back over towards where the sound of the horn was coming from, and I was suddenly confused. There was a pair of white poles just on the tree line. Where did those come from? I looked back over to Miguel and the chieftain, and they were still carrying on. I thought it wouldn't be much of a welcome for the guest of honor. Again, I looked back to the trees and the white poles. They connected at the top and kept going, weirdly. My eyes followed the structure up further. I was met by a colossal face looking at the fire. Those weren't poles. They were legs. A giant, 30-foot-tall thing stood on the tree line. It was lit only by the giant fire, but I could make out enough. Its skin was eggshell white. For how tall it was ghastly how skinny it was. It stood there, only in a loincloth, as its troublingly human eyes stared at the dancing fire. The hairs dropped to its shoulders and matched its ghostly white skin, and his mouth on its elongated head hung open limply. I couldn't figure out how to comprehend what I was looking at, let alone point it out. It stood there, silently, for about a minute, watching Miguel and the chieftain and the fire. Suddenly, it stepped out into the open, and everyone now turned to it. I was still stunned, speechless. It reached towards the fire, and Miguel, he was the last one to notice it. He didn't even get a chance to get a good look at it before the thing's fingers were clasped around him. Miguel screamed as he was hoisted into the air as he finally got a good look at it. Amy, Greg, and I were all completely thunderstruck. The locals looked on with bated breath. Miguel did his best to struggle and scream, but he was only in the thing's grasp for a few seconds before it tightened its grasp, and he went limp. The locals went wild in celebration. An absolute cry of glee rang out. We looked on in horror as the ghostly white skeleton of a man turned around and trudged back into the forest, Miguel's corpse still in hand. None of the locals even watched it leave. They just laughed and drank and danced, even harder than they already had been. I think it was Amy who came to her senses first. The next minute or so was a blur, but I know we were running through the woods. I ran harder than I ever had. I don't know if any of the islanders followed us. I couldn't hear anything. It was like my body put all of its resources into running. We got back to the boat in what had to be under a minute. Full throttle out of there. I would have paddled too if I had an oar. We circled around the side of the island on the way back to the mainland. I looked back to the island that Miguel died on. One of them stepped onto the beach and in the moonlight looked back at me.
Hey guys, it's CreepsMcPasta. I know I don't typically make videos that are out of character, but this time I have no choice. For many years now, I've been left comments on my videos from some of you saying, "Please Creeps, read Jeff the Killer," and "Please oh please, read Jeff the Killer, it's the scariest creepypasta ever." And for a while, I just ignored it. I had even mocked the story from time to time, but that all changed last night. For years, I thought the story of Jeff was just a story. I could have never imagined it might be true. It was 12 AM when I began to grow bored of playing Overwatch for the third day in a row with no sleep. Nothing was in my belly besides liters of Mountain Dew and at least 3 or 4 bags of Doritos. I had lost count of the calories days and days ago. I was playing with a few friends of mine, Creepypasta Jr. and Mr. Creepypasta, when Junior started telling me about the deep web. See, for a year or so now, I just thought the deep web was a rumour or some work of online fiction, but he claimed that he had been on there and explained it to me step by step. Though, he warned me saying,
"Seriously, Creeps, do not go there. Some of the content might not be suitable for someone with your mind."
My mind? I thought. What does he mean by that? I looked over to my waifu body pillow for advice. She always knew what to say. With just one look, she calmed me down and urged me to leave the session before I grew too angry. For another hour or so, I kept thinking how I wanted to prove him wrong, that I can go on the deep web. "I'll show him," I shouted, droplets of spit flying from my mouth and landing on my screen. So, I did it. I went on the deep web. At first, it was confusing. I guess the deep web is a lot bigger than the regular internet you and I go on. After an hour or so of searching, nothing really seemed to scare me. I was expecting something horrifying after what Junior had made it out to be. But for the most part, it didn't seem that bad. Just a bit slow when you loaded a different page. That was until I found a website called Smile for Me. The website had a dark red background that looked like it had been made in MS Paint, and in the middle of the screen read the text, "Do you want to smile?" with a yes or no clickable option. Hell yeah, I thought. Being the brave, badass adventurer I am, I leaned forward and squinted to see through the layer of Cheeto dust covering my monitor and clicked yes with as much force as I could muster. I damn near broke my mouse. It then loaded a picture of a girl, a very attractive one at that. My cheeks grew red with embarrassment and I could feel my nose beginning to bleed. I quickly looked over my shoulder to check on my waifu. Luckily, she was fast asleep. She's kind of the jealous type and I didn't want to give her the wrong idea about this girl. The picture soon began to distort and change, and soon there was a smile across the girl's face. Not just a regular smile, but one that looked as if it was cut into her cheeks from ear to ear. And then, Boom! A blood-curdling scream sounded from the page, and the screen went black. Just as I was about to nope the hell out of there, a new window popped up. A chat room that wanted me to make a username. Though part of me wanted to leave, the other part still wanted to prove that I was able to handle the deep web. So I didn't let it get the better of me. That was my mistake. I changed my username to Dick Richard Johnson. It's a play on words if you couldn't already tell. After I set my username, it let me in. There was only one other guy in the chat with the username Jeff the Killer. I made the logical assumption that this person must have been a Creepypasta fan. I typed in the chat, "Hello Jeff, Creepypasta fan are you?" He then typed back, "Creepy what?" I laughed out loud. Hard. That's when I realised I hadn't brushed my teeth in some time. I would have been embarrassed if anyone was in the room with me, but luckily it was just me and my waifu. "Come on, it may be my first time on the deep web, but I'm not that gullible," I responded. He replied as fast as lightning saying, "Not sure what you're talking about." "Oh come on," I continued. "There is no way your username is Jeff the Killer and you're not a Creepypasta fan." "But I am Jeff the Killer," he replied. I was shocked. Could this be true? Could it? I mean, there was no way that old story had any truth to it. Or was there? "Well, if you are who you say you are, then prove it to me," I demanded. "And how would I do that?" he asked. "Send me a picture of your face. If you are Jeff, then you must have that infamous face with a Glasgow smile and bleached skin." He quickly responded with an, "Okay." I waited and waited, with each passing minute feeling like hours. I had almost given up, saying, I knew this guy was a fraud. There was no way he could be the real Jeff. I stopped in the middle of my sentence the moment an image loaded on my screen. What I saw shook me to my core. I had to hold my hands over my mouth to withhold my vomit. There he was, staring back at me. A picture of Jeff the Killer with a timestamp and date to prove it was real. He then replied again, "Go ahead, do a reverse Google image search. Nothing will come up." So I did, and just like he said, nothing came up. I knew at this point I was dealing with the real Jeff the Killer. I typed back as fast as I could, and ignoring the stench that wafted from my mouth, "Please, I don't want any trouble." He quickly responded with, "Oh, there's going to be trouble. It's time for you to pay." I tried as fast as I could to exit out of the page, but it wouldn't let me. I tried shutting my computer off, but it wouldn't let me. Instead, words popped up on my monitor saying, "It's time for you to go to sleep. I know who you are." At that, I threw my monitor across the room hastily and unplugged my PC.
"Babe, what's going on?"
My waifu asked, having roused her from sleep due to the crashing of my monitor against the wall. I quickly screamed back, "Shut up! I'm trying to think here!" I soon snapped out of it. It wasn't like me to snap at someone like that, especially my own beautiful waifu. "Wait, please, I'm sorry. I didn't mean to yell at you." And just like that, she gave me the cold shoulder. Nobody could be as cold as her. Nobody. At that moment, I knew I was on my own. That's when my cell phone began to ring. The number read 666-666-666. I didn't even think a number like that was possible. I thought to myself, should I dare answer? Just as I was about to let it go to voicemail, all I could think was Junior laughing at me when he finds out I chickened out on the deep web. I could already hear him telling me I told you so. I knew then and there that I wasn't going to quit. Just as the phone hit the last ring, I picked up. "Hello?" I asked, my voice cracking prepubescently. "Mr. Killer Man, are you there?"
"Oh, I'm here all right,"
he answered.
"I'm here and I'm going to get you. I know you aren't really Dick Richard Johnson. I know you're actually CreepsMcPasta."
My heart stopped. I threw my phone against the wall and watched as it shattered. I heard footsteps, as though someone was coming down into my room here in the basement. But luckily, it was just my mom. I screamed, "Get out of my room!" And she proceeded to leave. I did what I had to do. I didn't want her to get involved in this mess I had caused. I knew Jeff wasn't going to give up that easy. So I spent the rest of the night preparing for what I assumed would be a duel with Jeff himself, that only one of us would survive. Luckily, I've been watching Naruto for years, so I could handle myself in a fight. The stairs creaked once again, and I yelled, "Mom, I told you to leave me be!"
"Oh, I'm not your mother. I'm your worst nightmare."
It was Jeff. Before I could even react, he was already down the stairs and attacking me. I took punch after punch from him. I'm ashamed to admit that I couldn't even get one good hit on the guy. At this point, I was on the ground and Jeff was still wailing on me. I was about to give up when I saw something in the corner of my eye. It was a picture of me and my waifu that I had framed last Christmas. I could hear a voice in the back of my mind telling me,
"Get up.
Get up, damn it.
Get up.
Come on, get happy."
It took all of my might, but I soon rose once again to my feet. Jeff looked shocked, almost scared. I could see it in his eyes. "That's the best you can do?" I asked, spitting out a blood-filled loogie. He chuckled at my determination.
"You've got guts, kid. I can't wait to tear them out."
Our epic battle once again continued, though I was still losing. But I had something he didn't have. I had hope. Though it's hard to keep onto hope when you're getting the living crap beaten out of you. I'm proud to say I held on to hope for maybe 30 or 40 seconds before I crawled into a ball and began to cry. Jeff kicked me over and over again before he grew tired and maybe just bored. He looked down and said,
"Come on, man. It's no fun if you don't get up. This is just pathetic."
I looked up, tears streaming down my face, and choked out, "Pathetic is my middle name." Wham! He kicked me right in the head and I fell unconscious. I woke up hours later in a dark room. I had no idea how long I had been out. I tried to move, but I was tied to a chair. I didn't even bother to scream for help, as I knew there was no point. I had accepted my fate. Then, out of the darkness appeared Jeff, his face so bright white it practically illuminated the room.
"Good morning, CreepsMcPasta,"
he greeted me.
"I almost thought you were never going to get up."
"Well, looks like you were wrong," I replied, my voice low due to the immense pain I was suffering. Luckily, it sounded badass. He chuckled.
"Yeah, I guess I was. Now that I have your attention, I'd like to make a deal with you."
A deal? What kind of deal could this guy possibly want to make with me? "Go on," I urged.
"See, for years now, you have been mocking me online and refused to spread the word of Jeff the Killer to your subscribers, but that all changes today. See, I'm going to let you live, and I'll even let you go home on one condition,"
he said. "And what might that be?" I asked.
I want you to make a video. Not just any video, a video about me and how I conquered the mighty CreepsMcPasta.
I laughed. That's it? That's all you want me to do? Alright, fine.
Well, there is one thing.
He chuckled darkly. That leads us to here, and why I'm making this video. I'm sorry everybody, but I wasn't strong enough to beat him. It saddens me to admit when I came home, my sweet waifu was gone. She left a letter saying how she loved me but deserved better. So, I'm alone now, in my basement. Alone with just my microphone and computer. My monitor's cracked in 3 different places, but it still works. Before the video ends, there is one more thing I have to say. The final part of the deal with Jeff was for me to reveal that... This pains me to say, but I, CreepsMcPasta, admit that Jeff the Killer is the greatest creepypasta ever told. Please, God, forgive me.
A few days ago, my 5-year-old daughter brought an old, beat-up purple toy into the house. It had motorized eyes that moved and blinked, a humongous mouth with goofy teeth, and a clear, plastic door on its stomach that you could open and close. I asked my daughter where she got it, and she said she had found it in the middle of the road. After we had a discussion about not going into the road without a grown-up, I took it from her and threw it straight into the garbage bin, since it was probably filthy and full of germs. The next day, I found it in a room. She denied taking it out of the garbage, but I didn't believe her. I chucked it again. That night, me and my wife were woken up by her crying. I went to comfort her. Once I got her to calm down, she started pointing at a closed closet. I looked in it, mostly to humor her. And there, again, was the toy. Again, she denied bringing it inside. I took it down, and the more I looked at the toy, the more familiar it seemed to me. It almost felt nostalgic. I had a feeling like I didn't want to throw it away. So, once I put it to bed, I googled it. After about 15 minutes, I found some forum posts from a couple years ago, and after reading them, I promptly took the toy outside, threw it on my grill, bathed it in gasoline, and burnt it until it was nothing but ashes. This is what I found. Found on the What Was That Thing Again forums, post title, Orange Furby Knockoff, posted by user 90skid_RTS_91 on April 22nd, 2015. When I was about 7, my grandma bought me this neon orange Furby knockoff for me and my cousins to play with. For the life of me, I can't remember what it was called. All I remember is that it was furry. It had a humongous mouth so you could feed it the fake food that it came with. And it had a see-through stomach with a hinge so you could open it and remove the food. I don't think I ever saw any commercials for it or anything. Does anyone know what those things were called? Thanks. Update. From the comments I've been reading, it's good to see that at least a handful of other people beside me seem to remember these things. The general consensus I've been reading is that people remember them as being creepy. Or, as one commenter put it, effing terrifying. So, I've got to ask, were they really that bad? I don't remember. Anyway, thanks to everyone who is searching for the answer to this fun mystery. Update. Solved. Thanks to user JWilson9891. They are called Gorbos. Here's a description I found on a collector's website. Quote, Gorbos, or in singular, Gorbo, were electronic robot toys produced from 1999 to 2000 by the short-lived Mexico-based company Lester Griffin Toys. They are perhaps most well known for having large, toothy mouths, motorized wheels in their mouths to allow the Gorbos to pull in or eat toy foods that came with a box, and small, motorized wheels on the base that give the toys limited mobility. Made to capitalize on the success of Furbies, Lester and Griffin had a limited marketing run in which Gorbos were touted as a more affordable alternative. The company was able to produce Gorbos less per unit than Furbies due to the more inexpensive infrared ports and cheaper microprocessors with vastly inferior AI. The Gorbos vocabulary is limited to 4 words: hello, eat, follow, and yum. And the microprocessors are limited mostly to processing motion tracking from the infrared port in the eyes, allowing the Gorbo to follow its owner child with its motorized wheels. Though the toy sold moderately in Mexico, Lester and Griffin was plagued by bad sales in the United States and was ultimately forced out of business when parents complained that the motorized wheels in their toys' mouths were catching and eating children's hair. There was even a rumor of one child losing a finger, but no documentation for this case has been found by this collector. There are also 4 models in the Gorbo series: blue, Bipsy, pink, Momo, orange, Zangi, and purple, Festo. I've been looking at pictures, and I guess I can kind of see why some people might have thought these were creepy. The plastic eyes are almost too big, with real-looking irises and big eyelashes, and the plastic teeth do look kind of like people teeth. Still, I personally kind of like the design. Super 90s. I'm trying to see if I can order one. I haven't been able to find any on eBay, but I'll keep looking. Update. I was able to track down a toy seller in Mexico that had an in-the-box, never-before-opened Gorbo. It's a Festo, the purple one. Should be here in about a week. Update. I was able to track down a toy seller in Mexico that had an in-the-box, never-before-opened Gorbo. It's a Festo, the purple one. Should be here in about a week. Update. I've been doing some research, and evidently, people still talk about Gorbos in Mexico. From what I can tell with my very limited high school Spanish, some kids thought they were creepy and started calling them Cocoy, which I guess is like a folklore ghost down there that kidnaps children. Small creature, red glowing eyes, hides in closets. How creepy. To be fair though, I heard the same sort of rumors about Furbies on the playground when I was 8. I remember one specific kid swore that a Furby attacked his cousin with an axe. This same kid also insisted that his dad worked at Nintendo, and I should add that I've since looked this kid up on Facebook, and he is now a lawyer. Update. The Gorbo should be here in about 2 days. I know it's kind of weird, but I feel like a kid getting ready for Christmas. I haven't felt this excitement about anything in a long time. It's kind of nice to recapture some of those feelings from when you were a kid, you know? Back when emotions were bigger and deeper and simpler. I miss that. Update. The Gorbo was supposed to arrive today, but it hasn't. I've contacted the seller. He swears up and down he sent it when he said he did. Maybe he's having trouble coming through customs? I don't know. Give me my damn toy, Mexico. Update. The Gorbo still hasn't arrived, so I've been busying myself with researching its history. Turns out the factory in Ciudad Juarez that was manufacturing Gorbos underwent a strike in 2000, which contributed to Lester Griffin going out of business. I've tried finding more information, but the factory burned down in 2003 with all its records, so no dice. Update. The good news is the Gorbo arrived. The bad news is the dealer appears to have lied about it being new. It's all dirty and even damaged. The left eye is completely gone. So there's only the exposed infrared emitter behind the lid. There's no plastic eye parts in the box, so I know it wasn't damaged in customs. The eyes don't blink at the same time either. Always one, then the other. I think the motor is wearing out too. Every time it moves its eyes or its mouth, there's a super loud cranking sound. Or was it always that way? Even so, I'm still pretty happy. It makes me feel super nostalgic, you know. Kinda makes me think back to when things were simpler. The Gorbo can say hello, eat, and follow just fine. I was expecting a silly kind of voice to match how silly it looks, and I thought I remembered it having a silly voice, but I must have remembered wrong. I guess the makers were going for a cute instead of silly, because it basically sounds like a small child when it talks. I guess they got a kid to record the lines. I know people said it was creepy, but now that I've got a real Gorbo in my hand, I like it. My son hates it though. He's 5. He insists it eats dreams. I've had to move it from the living room to my bedroom because he refuses to be in the same room with it. I don't remember having the same reaction when I was a kid. Maybe you just had to be the right age at the right period of time, you know? Update. My son appears to have warmed up to the Gorbo. I found it in his room twice. I even found it hidden under a pile of dirty clothes in the living room when he was watching a movie, so I guess he's playing with it now too. It's good to see your kid liking the same stuff as you. Kind of makes the nostalgia feel deeper. He denies taking it from my room, of course. He even made up a story about it getting into his closet by itself when he woke us up around 2 a.m. last night. I just smiled as I took it back to my room. I think he's a little young to be embarrassed by liking the same stuff his dad does, but one day, we'll probably be listening to the same Green Day albums, so I'll give him a pass for now. He insists he hates it, but come on, how can you hate Gorbo? Gorbo still works fine. The thing that's still really impressive to me is how good it is at following. You put it on the ground, you say, follow. You've got to be pretty loud and clear. And then its little wheels start whirring and it follows you. What a cool idea. Update. You know what's annoying? When your kids touch your stuff. I found my son in the garage with a hammer. He was in the middle of trying to smash Gorbo. He said it was bad. Said he needed to break it to, quote, help the kids? Neighbor kids? Maybe they didn't like it? Thankfully, most of the damage was superficial. The motor was fine, but he managed to break the only eye. I sent him to his room. The thing cost me $50, kid. Go break your own damn childhood. Update. I managed to find replacement eyes for Gorbo from a toy part dealer in Canada. So instead of having one broken eye, he now has 2 whole ones. And, as it turns out, you can mix baking soda and water for a cleaning solvent that won't bleach the fur. My childhood has officially been preserved. I've had to lock Gorbo in my closet. I keep finding him in my son's room, and even once outside in the yard when he was playing. I wanted to have something nice to share with my son, but I guess not. One day, he'll figure out how precious childhood is and stop wasting it. Kids just don't have a sense of value. Update. If anybody in the Denver, Colorado area has seen a 5-year-old boy, Caucasian with brown hair, possibly wearing a yellow shirt and blue shorts, please, 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 contact me, his father, directly. We love him and miss him very much. He answers to the name of Michael Swenson and might be in possession of a purple Gorbo toy, which appears to have gone missing too. I never really knew who my paternal grandmother was. I knew she was a person my mother hated and someone my father could hardly stand. She liked to be called by her first name, Isabella, even by my father and me. She was someone I only met twice throughout my life, even though she lived about 5 miles from us. But each time I met her, some sort of fight would lead to her leaving a lot earlier than usual. I was 14 the last time I saw her. It was the day before Christmas, and my mother and father were trying their very hardest to keep the atmosphere as bright as they possibly could. My aunt was helping my mother with a massive feast, and my father and uncle were watching a movie with me. We were all trying our hardest to avoid my grandmother as hard as we could. It was around halfway through the movie when Isabella walked into the living room and asked, "So, do you plan on spending the whole holidays messing around on the TV?" She pointed at me and continued, "Joseph, get your ass off the couch and come with me. I'll show you what a perfect family looks like." Before she could grab me, my father got in between us and said, "Stop. I'm tired of hearing about this perfect family of yours. It's fake. You're crazy, and I don't want you spreading that to my son." She stormed out of the house and exited my life forever. 8 months ago, she passed away from a heart attack. She didn't have much, but she left it all to my father. After 8 months of waiting, our family received the house, everything inside of the house, and $1.30 I found inside of a couch. After a short discussion between my mother and father, they decided to move into her house. It was bigger, and we could just put on newer furniture and appliances in the house and live a bit more comfortably. I was happy about their decision. They wanted me to stay in my grandmother's old room, and it was bigger, as well as gave me my own restroom. The first 3 nights went by normally. I still went to the same school. My same 3 friends, James, Christian, and Michael, came over to my house after school, and I generally stayed in my room at night. We were never a close family, and I never really cared about it until the 4th night in the house. It started around dinner time, and my mother was asking if I was sending any applications to colleges. I mumbled back that I was. After a couple of seconds of awkward silence, she said, "If you really did apply to colleges, you would have to ask me for money to pay for the application fee. So, what's going on? Why are you trying to avoid college?" After that, our conversation fell into a chasm of accusations from my mother and harsh retaliation by me. My father tried to stop the fight, but he was never a strong person. I finished dinner shortly after and went into my room. It didn't take me long to fall asleep, but I woke up around 2 to a small whining sound coming from my closet. Curious, I got off of my bed and looked around my room. After making sure no one was in my room, I walked up to the closet and placed a hand on the cool wooden door. Immediately, I felt a soft vibrating filling the door and felt, for the first time in a long time, absolutely peaceful. Slowly, my hand crawled down towards the doorknob and opened the door. It looked the same. A couple of coats on the hangers, a few board games, an old game system I never played. But there was a soft light coming from the back right corner of the closet. I reached towards the light and touched the corner of the room. The light immediately filled the room, and I had to cover my eyes. After a couple of seconds, the light was gone, and I was able to open my eyes once again. It was morning, and the first thing that caught my eye was how different my room looked. The walls that were once empty were now cluttered with various trophies I had won, signed posters of my favourite basketball players, and several newspaper clippings from our high school team winning state 2 years in a row, to me deciding to go immediately into the NBA draft instead of going to college. My wall showed me the life I had always wanted to live. Everything else about the room was still the same. Feeling a bit excited, I ran out of my room and into the kitchen. My mother had already prepared my favourite breakfast, pancakes, bacon, eggs and sausages, and I greedily scarfed every bite down. My father walked into the kitchen while laughing and said, "Whoa there, you ate my breakfast. It's fine, I'll just get something on my way to work. You got a big game today. Make sure you do well." Before I could even nod my head, he turned around and walked out of the door. School went by well until the basketball game. We were playing our rivals, and before the game, the coach told me that the team was depending on me for the win. I will spare you the details. I did absolutely terrible. I missed almost every shot, and by the end of the game, I could see the disappointed look on my father's face. On the ride back, my father tried to talk to me a couple of times, but he would just end up getting too frustrated and punching the steering wheel. Finally, when we were close to home,